The sky burned red over New Haven, a frontier colony clinging to the edge of human space. Ethan Carter crouched behind a shattered wall, his breath shallow, his hands trembling as he clutched a jagged piece of metal. The Xynarian raid had come without warning, sleek insectoid ships descending like locusts, their plasma cannons carving glowing scars into the earth. The colonists fought back with scavenged rifles and desperation, but the aliens were relentless, their armored forms moving with mechanical precision. Ethan's parents had shoved him into the ruins of their home, screaming for him to hide. He'd heard their cries cut short, replaced by the hiss of alien weapons. Now, silence hung heavy, broken only by the hum of the Xynarian scout ship hovering above. Its shadow crept closer, and Ethan's heart pounded like a war drum. He was 14, small for his age, with dirt-streaked cheeks and a mind racing faster than his legs ever could. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even supposed to be here. His family had come to New Haven for a fresh start, not a war. A metallic clang echoed nearby, and Ethan froze. Two Xynarians emerged from the smoke, their towering forms clad in shimmering exosuits. Their faces were angular, insect-like, with glowing violet eyes that scanned the ruins. One carried a glowing net, its threads pulsing with energy. The other held a device that emitted a low, whining hum, sweeping it over the ground like a predator sniffing for prey. "Human life signs detected," the first Xynarian said, its voice a grating buzz filtered through a translator. "Weak, insignificant." "Then why bother?" the second muttered, its tone dripping with disdain. "Lord Kelzar wants specimens, but this one's barely worth the effort." Ethan's grip tightened on the metal shard. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of overheard stories from the colony's pilots, tales of the galactic empire of Xynar, a civilization that crushed worlds like ants underfoot. They saw humans as vermin, a curiosity at best. But if they wanted him alive, maybe he could use that. Maybe he could survive. The device's whine grew louder, and the Xynarians turned toward his hiding spot. Ethan bolted, his legs pumping, debris crunching underfoot. The net snapped through the air, missing him by inches, its edges sizzling against the ground. He dove into a narrow alley, scrambling over rubble, but the aliens were fast, their suits amplifying their speed. The second Xynarian raised its weapon, and a beam of light grazed Ethan's arm, searing pain flashing through him. He stumbled, crashing into a pile of scrap metal, and the world tilted. Before he could rise, the net enveloped him, its threads tightening like a vice. Ethan thrashed, but the energy pulsed, numbing his limbs. The Xynarians loomed over him, their violet eyes glinting with cold curiosity. "Fragile," the first said, prodding him with a clawed hand. "Yet it resists." "Take it to the Iron Crown," the second ordered. "Let the scientists dissect its mind. If Lord Kelzar wants to waste time on these pests, so be it." Ethan's vision blurred as they dragged him toward the scout ship, its ramp lowering with a hiss. He caught a final glimpse of New Haven. Smoldering ruins, bodies strewn like broken dolls, the sky choked with ash. Rage burned in his chest, hotter than the pain in his arm. They thought he was weak. They thought humanity was nothing. They were wrong. Aboard the Iron Crown, the Xynarian flagship, Ethan woke in a sterile cell, its walls glowing faintly blue. His wrists were bound by energy cuffs, and a low hum vibrated through the floor. He tested the cuffs, wincing as they sparked, but his eyes darted around, searching. A loose panel in the corner caught his attention, its edges slightly warped, just enough for a tool to pry it open. He remembered his father teaching him to fix their colony's generators, showing him how to twist wires and bend metal. "We're survivors, Ethan," his father had said. "No matter where we go, we find a way." Ethan's fingers brushed a shard of metal embedded in his sleeve, missed by the Xynarians. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Hours later, the panel lay open, wires exposed. Ethan worked quickly, sweat beading on his brow, until the cuffs flickered and died. He slipped free, heart racing, and crept into the corridor. Alarms blared almost immediately, and Xynarian guards swarmed, their weapons drawn. Ethan darted into a vent, crawling through tight, humming passages, but the aliens were faster. A stun blast caught him, and darkness swallowed him whole. When he woke, Lord Kelzar stood before him, a towering figure in ornate armor, his violet eyes narrowing. "You escaped," Kelzar said, his voice a low rumble. "A primitive child, defying our technology. Intriguing." Ethan glared, his voice hoarse but defiant. "You think I'm weak? You'll see. We all will." Kelzar's mandibles twitched, a flicker of unease crossing his alien face. He turned to the scientists, his tone sharp. "Probe its mind, find out what makes it think it can challenge us." As the scientists prepared their machines, Ethan's mind raced. They'd underestimated him. They'd underestimated humanity. And that would be their downfall. The lab aboard the Iron Crown was a cold alien labyrinth of glowing panels and humming machinery. Ethan lay strapped to a sleek metallic table, its surface icy against his back. Energy restraints pinned his wrists and ankles, their faint buzz prickling his skin. Above him, a crystalline device hovered, its facets pulsing with violet light. The air smelled of ozone and something sharp, metallic, like blood, but not human. Lord Kelzar stood at the edge of the room, his towering form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light. His violet eyes glowed faintly, fixed on Ethan with an intensity that made the boy's skin crawl. Beside him, Xynarian scientists scuttled like insects, their clawed hands adjusting dials on the machine. One, a wiry figure with twitching mandibles, muttered in their grating language, the translator rendering it as, "The probe will extract its memories. If it resists, it dies." Ethan's heart hammered, but he forced his voice steady. "You think you can crack my head open like an egg? Good luck." Kelzar's mandibles clicked, a sound like breaking glass. "Your bravado is amusing, human, but your mind is weak. All minds are compared to ours." The scientist activated the device, and the violet light flared, stabbing into Ethan's skull like 1,000 needles. He screamed, his vision fracturing, memories tearing free like pages ripped from a book. He saw flashes of his life, running through New Haven's dusty fields, his mother's laugh, his father's hands guiding him to rewire a broken generator. But the probe dug deeper, unearthing fragments he didn't recognize. Ancient battlefields, humans in crude armor charging against impossible odds, scientists in labs crafting machines that defied logic. The scientists recoiled as the machine sparked, smoke curling from its core. "Impossible," one hissed. "Its mind resists." The feedback? "Push harder," Kelzar snapped, his voice edged with frustration. "Break it." The light surged again, and Ethan's scream echoed through the lab. But something shifted. The memories weren't just his. They were humanity's. He saw the Wright brothers' first flight, trenches of mud and blood, rockets piercing the sky, and cities rising from ashes. Each image burned with defiance, a refusal to surrender. The probe whined, its glow flickering, and Ethan's pain twisted into rage. "You think we're weak because we bleed," he gasped, his voice raw. "But that's why we fight harder." The machine exploded in a shower of sparks, flinging the scientist back. Ethan's restraints flickered, but held. Kelzar lunged forward, his claws seizing the nearest scientist by the throat. "Explain this failure." "Its mind, it's adaptive," the scientist choked out. "It rewires itself, resists intrusion. We've never seen." Kelzar hurled the scientist aside, his gaze locking onto Ethan. For the first time, the boy saw fear in those violet eyes, not overt, but a flicker, buried beneath layers of arrogance. "What are you?" Kelzar demanded, his voice low, dangerous. Ethan grinned, blood trickling from his nose. "Just a kid, but you're scared, aren't you?" Kelzar's mandibles twitched, and he turned to the scientists. "Analyze the data. Find out what makes it resist. If its species is this, anomalous, we must know." As the scientists scrambled to salvage the machine's fragments, Ethan's mind raced. The probe had hurt, but it had shown him something. Humanity's history. Its relentless drive to survive. The Xynarians thought they were invincible, but they didn't understand. Humans weren't just survivors. They were innovators, fighters, dreamers. And Ethan wasn't alone. Somewhere out there, others would come for him. He just had to hold on. Kelzar lingered, his gaze boring into Ethan. "You think your defiance matters," he said, his voice a cold whisper. "But you are one, and we are many. Your species will fall." Ethan met his stare, unflinching. "You don't get it. One human's all it takes to start a fire." Kelzar's eyes narrowed, and he stormed out, his armor clanking like a death knell. The scientists resumed their work, but their movements were frantic, their whispers laced with unease. Ethan lay still, his body aching, but his mind alive with possibilities. They'd underestimated him again. They'd underestimated humanity. And that mistake would burn them. The void of space stretched endlessly beyond the viewport of the Defiant, a battered human frigate orbiting a gas giant's moon. Inside, Captain Mara Lynn paced the bridge, her boots echoing on the scuffed metal floor. Her face was a map of scars, each line etched by loss, her gray-streaked hair pulled tight. The crew watched her warily, their hands hovering over controls, waiting for orders. They'd tracked the Xynarian scout ship that raided New Haven, but the trail led deep into enemy space, to the Iron Crown, the Empire's flagship. "Captain," her second-in-command, Lieutenant Reza said, his voice tight. "We're outnumbered, outgunned. If we go in, we're dead." Mara stopped, her gaze fixed on the star map flickering on the console. "They took a kid, Reza, a boy. If we let them think they can snatch our people and walk away, what's next? Earth?" Reza's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Mara's family had died in a Xynarian raid years ago, her grief forged into a blade she wielded against the Empire. She turned to the crew, her voice steel. "We're not just fighting for him. We're fighting for every colony they've burned, every life they've taken. We go in, we get him, and we make them bleed." The crew nodded, their faces grim but resolute. Humanity wasn't a fleet of warships or an empire spanning stars. It was scattered colonies, jury-rigged ships, and a refusal to break. Mara knew the odds, but she also knew humans didn't win by playing fair. They won by fighting dirty. Meanwhile, aboard the Iron Crown, Ethan woke in a new cell, its walls tighter, the air colder. His head throbbed from the probe, but his mind buzzed with clarity. The Xynarians feared humanity, and he'd heard whispers through the vents, plans to invade Earth, to crush the threat before it grew. They thought humans were weak, but their fear betrayed them. He tested the energy cuffs, wincing as they sparked. The vent above was sealed, but a faint hum pulsed through the floor. He traced it to a panel, its edges loose. Using a shard of metal from his sleeve, he pried it open, revealing a tangle of wires. His father's lessons echoed in his mind. Find the weak point, twist it. He worked fast, sweat beading on his brow until the cuffs flickered and died. Ethan slipped into the corridor, heart pounding, and ducked into a maintenance shaft. The ship's hum vibrated through the walls, guiding him toward the communication array. If he could send a signal, maybe someone would hear. He reached a terminal, its screen glowing with alien symbols, but his hands moved on instinct, rewiring circuits, bypassing locks. The screen flared, and he typed a message. Human captive, Xynarian flagship. Earth in danger. Help. Alarm screamed, lights flashing red. Ethan bolted, but guards swarmed, their weapons blazing. A stun blast grazed his leg, and he collapsed, dragged back to his cell. Lord Kelzar loomed over him, his violet eyes blazing. "You think your signal matters?" he snarled. "Your kind will die screaming." Ethan grinned, blood on his teeth. "You're scared. That's why you're angry." Kelzar's mandibles twitched, and he stormed out, barking orders to prepare for war. But Ethan's signal had reached the Defiant. Mara stared at the message, her heart racing. "He's alive," she said, her voice fierce. "And he's fighting. We move now." The fleet jumped, a patchwork of ships, freighters armed with scavenged cannons, fighters patched with duct tape. They emerged near Xynarian space, sensors screaming warnings. Mara gripped the console, her voice steady. "Hit them hard. Hit them fast. Show them what humans are made of." As the first Xynarian patrol ships appeared, Mara's fleet struck. Guerrilla tactics, unpredictable, relentless. The Empire's arrogance would be its downfall, and Ethan's signal had lit the fuse. Humanity wasn't just coming for him, it was coming for blood. The void erupted in fire as the Defiant led the human fleet into Xynarian space. Mara Lynn's voice crackled over the comms, sharp and unrelenting. "Flank left, hit their sensors! Don't let them lock on!" Her patchwork armada, freighters bristling with scavenged cannons, fighters patched with scrap, swarmed like hornets, striking fast and vanishing into the asteroid field. The Xynarian patrol, sleek and massive, loomed like predators, their plasma beams slicing through the dark. Aboard the Defiant, Mara gripped the console, her scarred face lit by the glow of exploding ships. "Reza! EMP now!" she barked. Lieutenant Reza slammed the controls, and a jury-rigged pulse weapon fired, its energy rippling outward. The nearest Xenarian dreadnought shuddered, its shields flickering, weapons falling silent. Mara grinned, fierce and feral. "That's human engineering. Chew on that!" The Xenarians retaliated, their beams carving through a freighter. Its debris scattering like ash. Mara's jaw tightened, but she refused to flinch. "Keep moving. They're slow, predictable. Use the rocks." Her fleet darted through the asteroid field, luring the enemy into collisions, their arrogance blinding them to the trap. Humans weren't stronger, but they were cunning, and every loss fueled their rage. Aboard the Iron Crown, Ethan woke in a tighter cell, its walls pulsing with energy. His leg ached from the stun blast, but his mind buzzed with defiance. The alarm still screamed, a reminder of his sabotage. A Xenarian guard, Tazra, entered, her violet eyes flickering with unease. She was smaller than the others, her exosuit scuffed, her mandibles twitching. "You caused chaos," she said, her translator's buzz softer than Kelzar's. "Why?" Ethan met her gaze unflinching. "Because you think we're nothing, but we're coming for you." Tazra hesitated, her claws tightening on her weapon. "I've seen your kind die. You're fragile, yet you fight. Why?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. "Because we don't give up. Ever." Her mandibles clicked, and she turned away, but Ethan saw doubt in her eyes. She returned later, slipping him a ration bar. "You'll need strength," she muttered, avoiding his gaze. "They'll kill you soon." Ethan nodded, sensing a crack in her loyalty. If he could reach her, maybe he could reach others. Outside, the battle raged. Mara's fleet struck from shadows, their EMPs disabling Xenarian shields, their fighters diving like knives. A Xenarian cruiser exploded, its debris pelting the Defiant. Reza winced, blood trickling from a gash on his temple. "We can't keep this up, Captain. They're adapting." Mara's eyes blazed. "Then we adapt faster. That's what humans do." She rerouted power to the engines, diving into the asteroid field, baiting the enemy into pursuit. A Xenarian ship collided with a rock, its hull crumpling, and Mara's crew cheered. But the cost was high. Another freighter vanished in a flash of plasma, its crew gone. Mara's hands trembled, but she clenched them into fists. "For them," she whispered, "for the kid." Aboard the Iron Crown, Tazra lingered outside Ethan's cell, her claws tapping nervously. The ship shuddered, alarms blaring. "Your people fight like beasts," she said, her voice low. "No logic, no order." Ethan grinned, blood on his teeth. "That's why we'll win. You think order makes you strong, it makes you predictable." Tazra's eyes widened, and she turned away, but Ethan saw the doubt deepen. The battle outside mirrored the one within her, a clash of loyalty and morality. As the Defiant drew closer, its cannons blazing, Ethan knew the Xenarians weren't ready for what humanity would bring. They'd underestimated him. They'd underestimated all of them, and now they'd pay. The War Council chamber aboard the Iron Crown was a cathedral of cold metal, its walls etched with glyphs of Xenarian conquest. Lord Kelzar stood at its center, his towering form radiating menace, his violet eyes glowing like dying stars. Around him, the council, scientists, generals, and advisors huddled over holographic displays, their mandibles twitching in agitation. The air hummed with tension, thick with the scent of burnt circuits from the failed probe. A scientist, Visrel, scuttled forward, his exosuit clinking. "The human's mind resists all intrusion," he buzzed, his translator crackling. "Its memories reveal a species that evolves unnaturally fast. They adapt, innovate, survive. In centuries, they've gone from primitives to starfarers." Kelzar's claws flexed, his voice a low growl. "Impossible. No species advances so quickly." Visrel tapped the hologram, projecting images from Ethan's mind, humans forging steel, splitting atoms, launching rockets. Their history is chaos, wars, plagues, collapse, yet each time they rise stronger. Their minds aren't just resilient, they're adaptive. If they continue, they'll surpass us. The council erupted in hisses and clicks, their arrogance fracturing. A general, Thalor, slammed his fist on the table. "Then we crush them now, before they become a threat." Kelzar's gaze darkened. "They are a threat. The boy's sabotage proves it. One child crippled our systems. Imagine billions. He turned to Visrel, his tone icy. It's biology? Primitive, Visrel said, but adaptable. Their immune systems evolve in generations, their minds rewire under stress, they thrive on chaos. Kelzar's mandibles clicked, a sound like breaking bones. Then we end it. Execute the boy, prepare the fleet for Earth, burn their worlds to ash. The council nodded, their fear palpable, but Kelzar's gaze lingered on the hologram, unease flickering in his eyes. He'd conquered dozens of species, but none like this. Humanity wasn't just defiant, they were unpredictable, dangerous. In his cell, Ethan lay bruised and aching, the energy cuffs biting into his wrists. Tazra entered, her violet eyes darting nervously. She held a data slate, its screen glowing with Xynarian text. "They're going to kill you," she whispered, her translator buzzing softly. "They fear your kind. They fear what you'll become." Ethan sat up, wincing. "Good, let them be scared. It means we've got a chance." Tazra's mandibles twitched, her voice trembling. "I've served the Empire my whole life, but I've seen your memories, your people. You fight for each other. We fight for fear. I can't." She stopped, her claws tightening on the slate. "I can't let them kill you." Ethan stared, hope flickering in his chest. "Then help me, help us." Tazra hesitated, then tapped the slate, disabling his cuffs. They flickered and died. And she handed him a small blaster, its grip alien in his hands. "The maintenance tunnels," she said, her voice firm. "I'll guide you, but we must move fast." They slipped into the shadows, Tazra leading him through tight, humming passages. Alarms blared, and guards swarmed, their beams scorching the walls. Ethan fired back, the blaster kicking in his hands, his aim wild but effective. Tazra fought beside him, her loyalty to the Empire shattering with each step. They reached an escape pod bay, its doors sealed. Tazra hacked the controls, her claws flying, but Kelzar's voice echoed behind them, cold and venomous. "Traitor!" He loomed in the corridor, his armor gleaming, his weapon aimed. "You disgrace our kind." Tazra turned, shielding Ethan. "You fear them because they're better than us. I won't let you destroy them." Kelzar fired, the beam grazing Tazra's shoulder. Ethan lunged, grabbing a loose panel and hurling it at Kelzar, buying time. Tazra slammed the controls, and the pod doors hissed open. They dove inside, Kelzar's roar echoing as the pod launched, hurtling into the void. Ethan stared at Tazra, her wound leaking violet blood. "You saved me," he said, voice raw. Tazra's eyes dimmed, but she nodded. "You're kind. You'll change everything." As the pod streaked toward human space, Kelzar watched from the viewport. His claws clenched. Humanity wasn't just a threat. They were a fire, spreading, unstoppable. And he'd lit the match. The escape pod screamed through the void, its hull rattling as it plunged toward human space. Ethan gripped the controls, his knuckles white, sweat stinging his eyes. Beside him, Tazra slumped, her violet blood pooling on the floor, her breathing shallow. The pod's interior was cramped, its walls humming with alien tech, screens flashing warnings in Xynarian script. Ethan's hands shook, but he forced them steady. They weren't safe yet. "You're hurt," he said, glancing at Tazra. "We need to." "Focus," she rasped, her translator buzzing faintly. "Kelzar won't let us go. He'll hunt us." Her claws tapped the console, rerouting power to the thrusters. "We need speed, distance." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He'd rewired generators on New Haven, but this was alien tech, complex, unpredictable. Still, humans adapted. He traced the wires, his fingers finding familiar patterns, and boosted the engines. The pod lurched, its hum deepening, but alarms blared louder. "They're tracking us," he muttered, scanning the screens. A blip appeared, the Iron Crown, closing fast. Back on the flagship, Kelzar stormed onto the bridge, his armor scorched from Ethan's makeshift attack. His violet eyes burned, fixed on the pod's signal. "Deploy interceptors," he snarled, his voice ablade. "The traitor dies with the human. No mercy." The bridge crew scrambled, their mandibles twitching in fear. Interceptors launched, sleek and deadly, their beams slicing through the dark. Kelzar watched, his claws digging into the console. The boy's escape wasn't just defiance. It was a spark, a threat to the Empire's order. He'd crush it, no matter the cost. Inside the pod, Tazra's eyes flickered, pain clouding them. "They're coming," she whispered, pointing to the blips. "We can't outrun them, not like this." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we don't run. We fight." He scanned the controls, spotting a flare emitter, meant for distress signals but rewired, it could blind sensors. His hands flew, twisting wires, rerouting power. "Hold on," he said, slamming the controls. The pod spat a burst of light, blinding the interceptor's sensors, and Ethan veered into an asteroid field, debris pinging off the hull. The interceptors pursued, their beams scorching the rocks, but the field was chaos, perfect for humans. Ethan wove through the maze, his instincts sharp, dodging blasts by inches. Tazra watched, her voice weak but awed. "You fight like you're born for this." Ethan grinned, blood on his teeth. "We're born to survive, you'll see." A beam grazed the pod, sparks flying, and the controls flickered. Tazra dragged herself upright, her claws steadying the helm. "Go left," she said, her voice firm. "There's a gap." They dove through, the pod shuddering, but the interceptors collided with asteroids, their wreckage spinning into the void. Ethan whooped, adrenaline surging, but Tazra's eyes dimmed. "They'll send more," she said, slumping. "Kelzar won't stop." Ethan's grin faded. "Then we keep moving. You saved me. I'm not letting you die." He rerouted power to the shields, buying time, but the Iron Crown loomed closer, its shadow swallowing the stars. Kelzar's voice crackled over the comms, cold and venomous. "You cannot escape, human. Surrender, and your death will be swift." Ethan leaned into the mic, his voice defiant. "You're scared, Kelzar. That's why you're chasing me. You know what we are." The line went silent, but the flagship's weapons locked on. Ethan veered, dodging beams, the pod shaking violently. Tazra's claws gripped his arm, her voice faint. "Your people. They'll fight. For you. For all of us." Ethan nodded, his eyes blazing. "They're coming, and when they do, you'll wish you'd never found us." As the pod streaked deeper into the void, Kelzar watched, his mandibles twitching. The boy was one spark, but humanity was a fire, and he'd lit it. The orbit of the Xynarian capital burned, a maelstrom of fire and debris. The Defiant led the human fleet, its hull scarred but defiant, weaving through plasma beams. Mara Lynn's voice roared over the comms, sharp as steel. "Hit their flanks. Use the drones." Her patchwork armada struck like wolves, kamikaze drones slamming into Xynarian shields, asteroids rigged with explosives shredding their hulls. The Empire's fleet loomed, vast and merciless, but humans fought dirty, unpredictable. Aboard the escape pod, Ethan and Tazra crashed into the Defiant's hangar, the impact jarring. Ethan stumbled out, Tazra leaning on him, her violet blood staining his arm. Mara met them, her scarred face fierce but softening at the sight of the boy. "You're alive," she said, voice raw. "You fought." Ethan nodded, breathless. "They're planning to wipe out Earth, a planet-killer weapon. We have to stop it." Mara's eyes blazed. "Then we end this." She handed him a blaster, her grip firm. "Stay close." Tazra coughed, her voice weak. "I'll guide you. I know their ship." Mara hesitated, then nodded, trusting the Xynarian defector. The battle raged outside, Xynarian dreadnoughts firing beams that carved through human ships. The Defiant dove into the chaos, its EMPs disabling shields, its cannons blazing. Reza's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, we're losing ships, they're adapting." "Then we adapt faster," Mara snapped, rerouting power to the engines. "Get us to the Iron Crown." The flagship loomed, its planet killer charging, a glow building in its core. Mara's fleet struck from all sides, drawing fire, buying time. Ethan, Mara, and Tazra boarded a shuttle, streaking toward the enemy ship. Xynarian interceptors pursued, but human fighters dove in, sacrificing themselves to clear the path. The shuttle crashed into the Iron Crown's hangar, sparks flying. Guards swarmed, their beams scorching the walls, but Ethan fired back, his aim steadier now. Tazra fought beside him, her loyalty to humanity sealed in blood. They fought through corridors, Tazra guiding them to the weapon's core. Kelzar's voice echoed over the intercom, venomous. "You think you can stop me, human? Your kind is vermin. You'll burn." Ethan grinned, blood on his teeth. "You're scared, Kelzar. That's why you're loud." They reached the core, its glow blinding, but guards blocked the way. Mara charged, her blaster blazing, taking hits to shield Ethan. Tazra hacked the controls, her claws shaking, but Kelzar appeared, his armor gleaming, his weapon aimed. "You've lost," he snarled, firing. The beam grazed Mara, who fell, blood pooling. Ethan lunged, grabbing a fallen guard's blade and slashing at Kelzar's armor, sparks flying. "We don't lose," Ethan said, voice fierce. "We thrive." Tazra slammed the controls, disabling the weapon, its glow fading. Kelzar roared, charging, but Mara rose, firing point blank, her shot piercing his chestplate. He staggered, violet blood leaking, and collapsed, his eyes dimming. "You will fall," he gasped, but Ethan leaned close, voice cold. "Not today." Outside, the human fleet struck the final blow, the Iron Crown's shields failing, its hull cracking. Mara limped, supported by Ethan as they fled to the shuttle. Tazra collapsed, her wounds too severe, but she smiled weakly. "You're kind? You'll change everything." The shuttle launched, the Iron Crown exploding behind them, debris scattering. The Defiant limped home, its crew cheering, tears mixing with blood. Ethan stared at the stars, Tazra's words echoing. Humanity wasn't just surviving, it was rising, unstoppable. Mara gripped his shoulder, her voice soft. "You did it, kid. You saved us." Ethan nodded, eyes blazing. "No, we saved us." As the fleet vanished into the void, the Xynarians watched, their empire fracturing. Humanity wasn't a spark anymore. It was a fire, and it would burn bright. The ruins of the Xynarian fleet drifted like ghosts in the void, their shattered hulls glinting under the light of a dying star. The Defiant limped home, its patchwork hull scarred but unbroken, a testament to human grit. Ethan Carter stood on the bridge, his bruised hands gripping the railing, his eyes fixed on the stars. The boy who'd hidden in New Haven's ruins was gone, replaced by someone harder, sharper, but still burning with hope. Captain Mara Lynn leaned against the console, her arm bandaged, her scarred face softer now. "You did good, kid," she said, her voice rough but warm. "Saved us all." Ethan glanced at her, his voice steady. "We saved us. Together." The fleet jumped, emerging near Earth, its blue curve a beacon in the dark. Cheers erupted across the ships, tears mixing with laughter. The colonies hailed them as heroes, their transmissions crackling with relief. But Ethan's thoughts lingered on Tazra. Her sacrifice etched in his mind. She'd seen humanity's potential, risked everything for it. He wouldn't forget. In the briefing room, Ethan shared what he'd learned from Tazra, the Xynarians' fear, their fractured empire, their plans to crush Earth. "They're not united," he said, his voice firm. "Some want peace, reform. Tazra proved that. We can't just fight, we have to reach out." Mara nodded, her eyes weary but resolute. "You're right, but not everyone will listen. Some will fight harder now, scared of what we are." She paused, gripping his shoulder. "That's your fight now, kid. Mine's done." Ethan stared, surprised. "You're retiring?" She smiled, faint but genuine. "I've lost too much, fought too long. You've got the fire we need. Lead them." She handed him her captain's insignia, its edges worn but shining. "Make sure they remember what we can be." The fleet landed on Earth, its skies clear, its cities buzzing with hope. Ethan stood before a crowd, his voice echoing through the square. "The Xynarians thought we were weak," he said, his words carrying weight. "But we're not. We're survivors, dreamers, fighters. They fear us because we grow, adapt, thrive, but we don't have to be their enemy. Tazra showed us that. We can build something better, together." The crowd cheered, but Ethan's gaze lifted to the stars. The Xynarian Empire was fracturing, reformists seeking alliance, others doubling down on war. Humanity's rise had shaken the galaxy and the future was uncertain, but that was human strength, thriving in chaos, forging hope from ashes. Later, Ethan stood on a hill overlooking New Haven's ruins, now dotted with rebuilding crews. Mara joined him, her steps slow. "You'll do fine," she said, her voice quiet. "You've got her spirit, your mother's, and Tazra's too." Ethan nodded, his eyes distant. "I keep thinking about what she said, that we'll change everything. I want to make sure it's for the better." Mara chuckled, rare and warm. "You will. Humans don't settle for less." She turned to leave, her silhouette fading into the dusk, passing the torch to a new generation. Ethan stayed, the wind carrying the scent of fresh earth and steel. The stars burned bright, each a challenge, a promise. He'd protect Earth, explore the galaxy, bridge divides. Humanity wasn't just a spark, it was a fire, spreading, unstoppable, and he'd carry it forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan whispered to the stars, "We're coming, and we'll be ready." The galaxy waited, vast and uncertain, but humanity's light would shine through. They'd rise, not just to survive but to thrive, a legacy Tazra had seen, Mara had fought for, and Ethan would build.